Good evening, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight on Facebook and or YouTube or whatever way you're joining us tonight. This is the second in a series of our Speaking of Jazz events that is specifically to celebrate Black History Month. Jazz is Black American music, and the West Michigan Jazz Society is committed to telling that story and telling that part of the story of the music. So we have three very special guests tonight who have had a whole host of experiences throughout their careers. And frankly, I'm just very honored to be speaking with them. I'm Jordan Van Hemert, and I teach at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. And our first guest is a Grand Rapids fixture, I would say, in the scene. And if you've heard her, you've been blessed because she is an incredibly talented vocalist. She is the 2011 West Michigan Jazz Society Musician of the Year. Her name is Edye Evans Hyde, and she's been singing jazz, blues, and music for over 30 years in West Michigan. She has sung in Los Angeles, Asia, and Europe, among many, many other destinations. She's shared the stage with so many musicians, including Linda Hopkins, Michael Bolton, the late Ray Charles, and Arturo Sandoval. Please welcome Edye Evans Hyde.
Well, thank you. Wow, Jordan, thank you for having me. And yeah, that little bio that you said of mine is probably not 30 years, it's probably more like 40 years. I probably need to update it a little bit.
I see.
But thank you for that. That was great.
We're blessed with all the more years of your experience then. That's great, Edye. I'm so amazed at your career.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Edye. Our next guest. So, to a lot of people, jazz cello might not be something that you think of on the regular, but after tonight, you're going to be thinking a lot more about it. Our next guest is the cellist Akua Dixon, and she has suited the instrument's earthy sound to the genre of jazz. She's played in Broadway orchestras and arranged, composed, and performed innovative jazz works for strings for over 3 decades. She's also the founder of Quartet Indigo, and she's played with everybody from Duke Ellington to Diana Ross. Please welcome Akua Dixon.
Wow. Hi.
Hey, Akua, how's it going?
I'm great. How are you, Jordan?
Doing really, really well. Now, our last guest hails from Detroit, Michigan, and where she is one of the most accomplished and in-demand drummers in the city. Now, Detroit is legendary in and of itself, but her father actually was also a legend in his own right, Mr. Harold McKinney, who once played with Billie Holiday. Gayelynn McKinney started playing the drums at the age of 2. And since then, she's gone on to have a storied career, including several Grammy nominations, winning the Kresge Arts Fellowship, the Motor City Music Award, and the Detroit Black Music Award. Gayelynn McKinney has played with many, many notable artists, including Aretha Franklin, Chaka Khan, Steve Ture, David Fathead Newman, Regina Carter. The list goes on and on. If we were to list everybody that Gayelynn and Edye and Akua has played with, we'd be here a long time, and we wouldn't even get to hear them speak. So instead of doing that, we're going to move on, and I'm going to welcome up Gayelynn McKinney. Welcome, Gayelynn.
Oh, hi. How you doing, Jordan? Thanks for having me.
Doing really well. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'd like to kick things off today and just ask you all about if you would kind of tell us how you got into music. So how about, let's start with you, Gayelynn. I think I saw you nod, so that's
Okay.
the universal signal for we're going.
I just, I wanted to make sure, no one else wanted to go first. I got into music because of my parents, basically. Both of my parents were musicians. My mother was an opera singer, and she also sang in productions like Porgy and Bess and Carmen. And then my father was a jazz musician, and I grew up in a household of music. That was my alarm clock every day, was listening to mom in the kitchen singing opera and dad playing jazz in the other room. It was a perfect combination. But so I kind of grew up in it, and many musicians were constantly coming in and out the house because dad had a rehearsal probably almost every day. So I was immersed in it, and so that's pretty much how I got into music.
That might be a weird combination to some, but I think it's a pretty good combination. Keeps things interesting, right?
Uh-huh.
Edye, let's throw it over to you.
Oh, mine is all over the place. My parents did not play an instrument. My mom sang a little bit, but mainly they just loved music. So we had music, going around, records all the time. And at some point, I think I wanted to be in music. And when I was in high school, I was in choir and band, and back then they let you do all of that once, but they don't let you do that anymore. But I was in choir and band, and then I got to college and decided I want to be a music major. So I got a bachelor's degree in music education. So I went the whole classical route, but on the weekends I was playing in a rock band. So my classical teachers weren't real happy with me. But I loved it, and I told them I was singing correctly as much as I could because they were teaching it. And and then after that, it was pretty much, this is what I want to do. I did a little bit of teaching, but singing was what I wanted to do. And so I married a guitar player. So so perfect. Unless you got a piano player, guitar player is the next person. When it comes to being able just to be a duo or whatever. So we've been working together for over 40 years, and we love it.
Yes, Mike, wonderful household name in the Grand Rapids jazz scene, and of course, I'm sure we'll bring Evan up at some point. You have to talk about Evan. He's a good guy.
Right.
So Akua, how did you get started in music?
Well, I have to say that neither one of my parents were musicians, but my mother's family in the South, where they grew up, they had a piano in their house growing up. So all of her sisters and brothers could tinkle on the keys and play their spirituals and some blues, So I grew up in a house that had a piano. That's a long time ago, so it was before computers and Spotify. So if you wanted music, you went to Shermer's and you took the sheet music and you went in the booth and played the piano, and then you took it home and you learned it. So there was always music in my house, and I went to church, So I learned to sing, and the Sister Rose that played the piano also gave me some pointers at the piano, and that's where I started. But my formal training, my elementary school in New York was really, I was in a blessed situation. I started cello in 4th grade. I had a half a day of music, a half a day of academics for 4th, 5th, and 6th. And from there in New York City, there was just so much music at that time. And then, on into performing arts. I was gigging in junior high school. So I had an older sister that played violin. So my parents didn't worry about me going because I was going with them, and followed that all through high school and into college, and starting to work at the Apollo, and from there just kept on trucking. I've never stopped working.
That's what I like to hear. I mean, that's really incredible. I just think like it's such a testament to our craft of music, that it is something that you do for a lifetime, and it is something that you are involved in from a young age. It kind of catches you, and then it just takes over your life, you know, as I've heard you all say. And so when you got into music, who were you listening to? You know, some of you come from musical households and some not, but who were you checking out on records?
Well, in my case, when I was in school, of course, I got introduced to classical repertoire, string quartets, and things like that. But with sisters and brothers and living in the hood, I was listening to R&B and things like that growing up. You know, light jazz, B.B. King, some big bands.
I guess in my case, not only did I hear it in the household live, but my father had a extensive record collection, and the range of it was from the French composer Debussy all the way through the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Herbie Hancock, Temptations, Old Town, and then to Butcher's Brew. So
Yeah.
so he had so a lot of my time was spent in front of the stereo. We had to sit in front of the stereo, and my ear was, probably was not good for me, but I had to immerse myself. So I would sit right next to the speaker and just listen to the music and just immerse myself in it. And unfortunately, I have to admit, and I'm sorry about this now, but I didn't do a lot of album cover reading. I was just so busy listening that I didn't want to read the album cover because it was distracting me from listening. so that was, I wish I'm starting to go back now and just read some of those album covers, but that's pretty much what I did growing up. Was I just really listened to a lot of music, and of course set up under my father's drummers and tried to see whatever they were doing. I wanted to see what it was, so I do the same thing, sitting next to the speakers. I would sit right next to their hi-hat foot. And I remember George Davison, a very wonderful drummer in Detroit. He's played with some of everybody in his lifetime too. He said he was always very nervous because I was here so close to the hi-hat that he was afraid that the hi-hat was going to take my nose off. But that's how I had to see what he was doing. I had to be in it. So that's how pretty much I immersed myself in the music.
So when I was a kid, my dad did the same thing. He had so many albums, and they were mainly jazz. They're mainly blues. He had a real thing for Nancy Wilson. And so I listened to her like constantly because he was always playing Sweet Nancy. That's what he'd call her. And so when I was young, I did listen to a lot of that, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald. He just had all of them. And I listened and was kind of immersed. I think that helped me later on in life. But then I got to be a teenager. And then, so the teenage years was, Diana Ross. It was the Jackson 5. It was that whole era was what I was listening to constantly. And people laugh at me because I also had this thing for Barbra Streisand. I just had this thing for Barbra Streisand. I don't know what it was, but I was always singing her stuff as well. So I always kind of, then I got into the rock stuff, like Gayelynn was, saying all these different things you're listening to. And that was me. I felt like I was I couldn't say, well, what kind of singer are you? Well, I'm a jazz singer, but I like a lot of other stuff too. So I kind of grew up in kind of an eclectic, period of music.
I like Barbra Streisand too.
Real quick story. My parents lived in Chicago, and I was very young, and my dad used to wake me up every morning, and I don't know what it was about this particular radio station, but every morning at the same time, he'd play Barbra Streisand. So I really think my dad totally messed me up by that song. And I think it was People. I think it was People that I'd hear every morning.
The one that my mother.
So it's his fault.
The one that my mother sang all the time was Evergreen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's my mother singing that all
Yep. I eventually sang that about 100 times, or more.
There are songs like that that get stuck with you when you work. People don't realize it. You enjoy it very differently than they do. They hear it once or twice and that's over. When you're doing a show and you're on tour and you're doing it a bunch of times a day and all over the world, and it's the same show, it can get to you.
Yeah. I believe that.
Yeah, so actually that's a really good point, Akua. You all have done, what I would consider to be like a really great amount of touring as artists. And I'm wondering, with that particular kind of lifestyle, I know we can't really do it as much now, but I mean, what do you think that did for your your art and making your way as a musician?
Well, for me, growing up in New York, especially because there was just such an abundance of work when I started in the 70s, and freelancing. Since I played cello, like these ladies too, when you study all different kinds of music, you can work in different areas. There was so much music going on in New York that I could be on a classical gig, I could be on a jazz gig, I could be on a funk gig, I could be on a Latin gig. So as a kid, I just absorbed it all. And after you get finished working, you go hang out in the clubs, so because Harlem was jumping, you'd go over to the Baron and catch Cannonball, or to the Vanguard and catch Dexter, so having a chance to hear all of this stuff and then also writing myself all of this time because I had a string quartet and there really isn't music for string quartet and jazz, so having to be the writer, what pieces, not only original things, but what classics are we going to play and absorb and learn and do was always a challenge, so getting to see all these different things and play all these different styles made me well-rounded,
Yeah, I didn't tour. Like when you two talk about touring, y'all do some touring. I have a gig here and there. Like when I went to China, it was a 4-month gig and I absolutely loved it. And what was interesting about being in China, which I don't know if you guys have, but they love jazz too. I remember going to a dinner with some people and, Sarah, Ella Fitzgerald and Frank Sinatra, and they would just say these, songs that they wanted me to sing. And then one night I went to a night that a band, it was a Filipino band. And so they were all playing all the pop stuff that was going on at that time. And I don't know, for some reason, they thought I could sing them, which I did. I went up and sang the songs they were talking about. But the love that they have for jazz, and we were in Italy once and we did a tour around different places. I think that they love and appreciate and understand jazz even more than we do sometimes. in this country, they definitely adore it, and they talk about it all the time. So I felt, especially to Shanghai, I felt like I was not much different than they were. Do you know what I mean? Like, they love the same things I loved and was doing. So it's you do learn a lot.
Edie, do you ever get the feeling that we kind of in this country seem to take for granted the gift that our country, like, that was created here by the Black tradition, the tradition of Black music that is jazz? Do you ever feel like we take that for granted?
I think we take it for granted, and I also think in a social way, it is not paid a lot of attention to. I don't want to be mad at this, but I don't want people to be mad at me. But I think there's a lot of discrimination that kind of goes along with the music. And I think that we don't like our music or understand it maybe as much as people in other countries. So yeah, I think that we don't appreciate it as much as others.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. When you travel out of your country, it seems jazz seems to get a lot more love than what you get when you're in your country. Unfortunately, it feels that way a lot of times. I mean, people come out to see jazz, but I feel like it's not the same appreciation as you get when you go somewhere else. They love it. That's why a lot of jazz musicians end up moving out of the country because of that reason. But that's not to say that there's not jazz lovers here. But we probably do take it for granted because we live around it all the time.
I have to agree with that. Having experienced touring with some top name bands, getting to tour with Max Roach. Max was a king when he was in Europe, and the kind of crowds that he drew and the attention that he got, just off the hook. And in my case, since I had also toured in the States with even like Liza Minnelli, who has a phenomenal audience, or somebody like that. For most Black artists, especially, I got to tour with James Brown. He had a crowd and he was welcomed here. But the jazz artists that I played with here, the kind of renown that they got in Europe was just off the hook. And I didn't get that same sense here. People came to the clubs and the clubs were packed. The clubs are small. They're packing stadiums, like rock stars.
And the other thing is too, I noticed that when you go to other countries and play jazz, especially in the club setting, you can hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying anything. They're all into the music. And sometimes you go to a jazz concert here in a club, especially, people are talking and they some are paying attention, and some of the ones that want to hear the music are having a hard time because there's other people talking. So it's just a little different, here in the States.
That's about the lack of respect for the music here in the States in that regard. I hate to say it, but I think a lot of that is training. In Europe, people appreciate, love, and study music in a different way than they get to study music here. I find that there's a lot of European musicians who've studied the hell out of jazz, because they have a curiosity and a love for the music. It's picking up here, but it's still very different.
Yeah, and it is, whenever there is a financial situation going in the the schools, the public schools, that is the first thing that gets cut. We have a lot of arts that are cut in general, but that's the first. You won't cut the sports, but we'll definitely cut the music. And I think that is a problem as well. Like you say, there's a training situation that's not going on, so things get lost.
I feel too that women, especially, have had the role of educating children, of nurturing children, and especially in the direction of the music in this country. Black women in African American music aren't given the space, place, or respect that they should have. And I think that's one of the reasons why you have programs like this coming out now. It's very difficult for us if we're not just a singer. I can walk into a venue and have my cello on my back, so you can't miss it, and somebody will say, "Oh, you're the singer." Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be the singer. And I said, no. What do you think I'm carrying this thing for? But the opportunities for Black women, even in African American music, are very difficult and very challenging. And I would say in the school situation, since when I went to public school and I auditioned for the music class, it wasn't a matter of male, female. It was, did you have a good ear or didn't you have a good ear? So women, there was a lot of women in my music classes all coming up, And when I got out of college and I'm looking around and I look at all the orchestras and Broadway, places like this, even in jazz bands, it's all men.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, that's definitely been the case in most situations. When it comes, it's hard. But it's better than, I will say that it is better now than it used to be.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's
definitely, yes.
But it's still, it's still a little bit of a boys club in a lot of ways. And I laughed at you talking about you walking in with a big old case on your back, and they said, "Oh, you just singer." Would you believe that happened to me?
I know it.
I'm singing drums now, right? I got a drum set. I'm putting bands together. Oh, are you singing today?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I was looking quite astonished. No.
Right. Like I'd be carrying that for somebody else. Okay. No.
Well, yes, it's something else, It's something else.
Yeah.
But, go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you go ahead.
So I one of my favorite figures in jazz history is the great Mary Lou Williams.
Oh, yeah.
And over and over and over again, I've watched her not get her due. So when I teach my jazz history class, you better believe she's coming up.
Okay.
And one thing that really stuck out to me is there's this critic, Ugu Panasi, who said, well, you would never know it was a woman playing. Mary Lou plays like a man, basically. And he's intending this to be a compliment, right?
Yes.
Why then why is this so, so there are a couple of different things, and by a couple I mean like 20 different things that I could pick out about that comment that I could just be frustrated with.
Yeah.
First and foremost, the fact that he would say that, okay, so now are we saying jazz is masculine so that women can't excel at it? Are we saying that the piano is a man's instrument so women can't excel at that? Are we saying that, like, what are we trying to send? Like, what message are we trying to send? And so I guess what the question that I'm asking is, I know there are so often, like you all mentioned when you were asked if you were the singer, and really that's only the true for one person, for Edye, but I'm wondering, what is it about the music that lends or it there's the perception of ignorant people that say, okay, well, this is a man's art form, and to be good at it, then I need to compare you to a man. What is that? Like, what sort of just tomfoolery is that? Like, what? I can't find another word for it without becoming wildly upset. So somebody help me out here.
Well, I think most of it is because people, that's all for years, that's all they saw was men doing it. So they didn't see a whole lot of women. Like, shoot, the Sweethearts of Rhythm back in the day must have been a phenomenon to people, because there was nothing going on. But the only reason that happened was because of, I think, the war, and so men they couldn't play, and so women had to play. They had to, people still needed the entertainment. So why it stayed so, obviously they could do it because you could see very clearly that they were throwing down.
Yeah.
So I don't know why the perception that women couldn't do this, or it became still male dominant. I still don't understand that perception. I don't know if it was a guarded thing by males not to want to have women be a part of it or not. I don't know. Akua, what do you say about it?
Well, I think that some things are force of habit, and when I look at like festivals that have a bunch of people on the lineup, all men and men's bands, a few female singers, and maybe one or two women instrumentalists, but the percentage is really, really low. So that's on the part of promoters as well as people who hire others in their band. The difficulty in getting a woman into a band. What's the problem? Why not?
Maybe it's a travel thing, maybe maybe they want people to share rooms or something. I don't know.
Trust me, I've been on the road with all male bands of all types and all sizes, and in some ways it wasn't enjoyable.
I know it was.
Not because of them approaching me, because I was one of the guys in the band, in a sense, watching how they are on the road.
Right.
It's like get out of jail free card. Especially if they get to tour or go someplace where people are enamored, women are enamored by them, So there's a lot of reasons, but I think that giving women the opportunity and putting them in places where other women, young girls, can see that there are women who are achieving and who are capable of being well educated in music, I think will make a big difference. It's one thing to have people, and I'm not saying it as a negative, because maybe it doesn't take conservatory training to do, because there's a lot of people who I think play better than somebody who ever went to a conservatory. It's just their natural gift. But trying to balance people getting to see all sides and ways that you can be in music and be good will help.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that too. Because like right now, I do applied music at Oakland University, and I have students, and there's not one girl, not one.
Yeah.
And Marion has a combo class at Oakland as well, and she had a girl, but now that girl is not there this year. But she did manage to get a girl on trumpet, so there's one girl in the band. But we're talking about out of all these, musicians, young musicians, it's like two girls.
Yeah.
It's still it's still rare, to see women in this genre of music.
I have to say too that there's a large difference in how many African American girls get to study music and to go into music, and people of other nationalities. We are not, before, when it was in the schools and stuff like that, and our parents were able to access it, and it wasn't a ridiculous amount of money, we were able to participate and excel. Okay. Now there's a different kind of excellence that comes from just training without a natural gift for the craft, you know. And a lot of the young people that I see, their parents all have money to train them, you know.
Right.
I also meet a lot of young kids in poorer places who have a gift for it, who don't have an opportunity to get their gift nurtured.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm seeing a lot more on one side than the other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asked to mentor in some places, and I said, well, do you have any Black students? In a city like New York, you can't find one, you know.
Well, it's not that they're not out there. I mean, and it's not that women and talented women at that haven't been, you know, in the music. You know, you think about The Latest Snow, and you think about Melba Liston, you think about the great Mary Lou Williams. The list goes on and on and on, and you know, even to later musicians like Toshiko Akiyoshi. You know, there are it's not like they're not around. So I you know, part of me is saddened deeply because it's 2021. It's not like we're living in some, like, you know, post-apocalyptic nightmare world or something. Well, it kind of is. No, it's 2021, and for all the progress that it's close. Yeah, I see that occur. Yeah. So we take questions from our audience typically, and we do have a question here. And is that question is, why is that the jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra is so male dominated?
Go right ahead.
Well, I'm going to say this. Like I said, I started professionally. I got my union card in 1970. Okay, that's a long time ago. When I started working, and if you look, you can Google, say, the New York Philharmonic. At that time, it's an all-white male orchestra. Okay, all the jazz bands were also all Black male or either all white male. There was very little mixing. Okay. We picketed and marched and everything in New York during the Civil Rights era so that there would be an opportunity for African Americans to get a chance to play. Okay. The legal wording came out that it was for minorities, so we weren't hired. They hired white women and Asians, okay, to fill their quota. Okay. When you look at the Black bands and jazz at Lincoln Center, which came much later, they're also not specifically a union house. And to my knowledge, the union has worked with them over a lot of years to try to get them to add women. And they finally did add Camille, who is really a fantastic saxophonist and vocalist. But there are other women who should also have the opportunity. But still, I think that those are male-dominated and institutions, and it's going to take a lot to get them to change.
What happened?
What'd you say?
I'm sorry, all of you guys went away for a minute, but you're back now.
Okay. I can't hear you, Jordan.
Oh, sorry. I just said okay to Edie's comment. Sorry about that.
I can't hear you.
Gayelynn, you're on mute still.
Akua,
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you this story, but I'm not going to tell you online. But there was a certain, well, I will tell you this. There's a certain person I went to, this was years ago, and it was me, Vanessa Rubin, Straight Ahead, ladies of Straight Ahead, Marion and Elena, Cynthia Dewberry, and I. And we went to this thing to see someone speak. And they were speaking to a sea of young male musicians. And the words that came from this person's mouth was unbelievable. He said, yes, well, and you know, generally women can't play, you know, jazz as well as men. and needless to say, and then he said, and vocalists are not really musicians. And
guess who that was? I've heard some ignorant things come out that same mouth. Go ahead.
And I was so angry. I said, he's speaking to a large group of young males so that they will go out here and keep perpetuating the boys club, and it was really infuriating, and I was very disappointed to hear that come out of his mouth. I was like, wow, unreal, especially when he had some ladies, sitting in the audience looking at him. It's like, and how did that make? I know how it made me feel, and I'm like, that's really not cool. But that's another reason why this is perpetuated by men too, to keep a boys club. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, and to keep women in a certain place and space. And I definitely have to agree with that. Working some of those places has been in a lot of ways torturous, having to deal with that kind of attitudes and personalities. But I will say this too, that the biggest shame is that one person like that, with that kind of attitude, who can be in control of so much within the entire industry, can hold the entire industry back in that regard. And he's not the first one. Who's been opinionated, but whose opinion has caused the music to be halted. Because everybody has a gift for music. It's not a matter of male, female, or color, or whatever. If you're feeling the music and it's coming from a certain source, that's your gift, and you're supposed to be able to learn and generate it, and someone's opinion shouldn't really stop that.
Well, and that's just like, one of my most revered mentors, and I don't even know if she knows or if she ever knew that meant so much when she said this to me, but the great Jerry Allen used to say that growing up in Detroit, she said the community and particularly the community of jazz musicians that she hung around with, and I think she was really referring to Marcus Belgrave. She was, referring to a lot of the people that surrounded her in that great community. She said that if you did the work, if you learned the craft and you worked at the craft, that deserves to be rewarded. And that's how I came up, and that's how, I want you all to come up. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that, Akua, when you're saying, this everybody who has a gift deserves to be able to hone that gift. Yes. And yeah, it's really kind of frustrating when somebody who has a large audience like that, and I've been in rooms too, and I've been uncomfortable when there has been a few others or guests or whomever who have said, or band leaders who have said, I really know when it's a female bass player, and instead of a man or something like that. And I thought about kind of raising my hand and saying, "Oh, it swings harder or something." What are you talking about? No, and I just it disturbs me that still is it's still a problem. We have Melissa in the crowd here, and she says she would love to hear about the experience of women in jazz, specifically here in Grand Rapids, and also the role of women historically in the Idlewild scene here. So you have the floor.
Well, the Idlewild scene is something I need to learn a little bit about, because that was actually the scene of my parents. So they would go to Idlewild. I don't know if the other ladies know anything about Idlewild, but it was a place for, it was cabins, it was all the at that time that were rock legends or jazz legends, or I shouldn't say rock legends, I'd say R&B. And then and they would go up there and play as well. But it was kind of a, I don't know what I can't think of the word. What do you call it when you go up to your cottage? And anyway, I can't think of it right now. Pardon?
Yeah, it was
Gayelynn,
it was a black resort. It was
yeah, that's the word I was looking for. The resort world, and it was great. It was great. And this is the one story that I know that how it went away is that when Black people were starting to actually go to white resorts or going to golfing or whatever, when it became a little more, the opportunity was for them to join white spaces, that kind of died, because that's what, I think that's the thing Black people wanted at that time to do, to be able to be in white spaces. But the Black space that they had, I guess, was awesome. I think the other question was, when it comes to women in jazz in Grand Rapids, tends to be like we're talking about women singers, and I don't know, and pianists, I don't know if there are any other women musicians. I can't think off the top of my head right now, but mainly it's men driven, and we have a few women pianists, but it's mainly kind of women. We have about 3 or 4 different women who are, we're the jazz singers. So I would say what we're doing, what Jordan's doing right now, is great, because I think it brings in some younger people. And I also think that, you get people, like Akua or Gayelynn, and they tell you what it's about. Because a lot of people don't know, what is jazz really about, I had a classical person come to me one day and says, "You guys just kind of play around, don't you? I mean, how do when it comes to, scat singing or improvising." He didn't understand it at all, because I was telling him about, yes, we do practice form. And within that form, I mean, I almost had to give him a lesson. I was like, I'm not getting paid enough. Come on now. But it was shocking to me that he didn't understand that, we have a similar speak, but we may just use it a little different, like improvisational. And they just don't, I don't know why they don't know that, the three of you, we actually have a training. We actually know what form is, and we actually know these things that they don't, because they just read what's on the paper. And I think that really, like, surprises them, that it shocks them that we're able to pull that off, because we were trained that way. They don't know that. Hopefully that answered their question.
Yeah, I think it did. I certainly think it would answer their question. Do you ever think it's because people are so afraid of something that they know so little about? I mean, I have teachers who talk about this music being magical, really, really magical, that you can get on a bandstand with 3 or 4 or 18 people who all speak a language, who have all trained in a language, who have all studied the tradition, studied the records, studied, gone to the clubs and hung out, and you can't get that from a book. You can't read that on a piece of paper. And so I'm wondering if that is, I'm not trying to excuse that behavior, because frankly that is, I mean, it's straight up nonsense. But I wonder if some of that is explained by the fact that someone would be so ignorant and and be afraid of just how much it is that they don't know. and
Right.
that maybe, just maybe, there's a whole musical world out there that they have not even dipped a little pinky toe into. I don't know. I think that
Can I
that
say
person,
something in reference to that too? I
yes.
really think that it has a lot to do with ego. Okay, and European music has been at the forefront of musical training, especially in this country. When I went to school, there were no jazz programs. You had to take European classical music, period, end of sentence. Okay, you studied nothing about the music of America, which, in addition to jazz, there's a lot of American music by white American composers who aren't writing strictly classical music. You know, there's none of any of that in traditional school teaching. Whereas even if you study in European classical music, you might study madrigals. Okay, they don't take them through what's a hymn. You know, everything is just dealt with it from a different perspective. When I have a student who had questions because he was learning a blues, and the key signature for a blues, because of the seventh, is not analyzed in the European tradition, because in C major you're supposed to have B natural. Okay, and he just wasn't getting it why you couldn't put a blues into that box. And I'm saying, why does it have to be analyzed by that box? If you can't put it into that box, does that make it incorrect? A lot of music is taught by rote. And I have to say that because when I got out of high school, my first gig was at the Apollo with James Brown. It had nothing to do with what was written on the paper. I had to fit into the groove. Okay? If I was working with a Latin band, I had to learn how to play with the guy that's playing the cowbells, you know, and whoever's keeping whatever rhythm. I had to keep my rhythm with their rhythm. But it's mastered by rote. It's not mastered by reading a piece of paper. And still colleges today, everything is taught by that piece of paper, you know, and taught out of that specific box. I'm not saying it's a bad box, but the box has grown up, you know, and there's more boxes that we have as musicians today to deal with and pick from and learn from. You know, I like a lot of music from a lot of other countries, you know, and I'm sure you ladies do too, you know.
Yeah, and sometimes you just got to step outside the box.
Right, right. And why not?
Yeah, and why not? It's nothing wrong with it, you know. And as jazz musicians, we tend to do that. We tend to step outside the box. We listen to everything, you know.
Yes.
And that's the only thing about classical musicians, is that they tend to stay right in that box and they don't step outside it to appreciate what some other types of music, you know. And unfortunately, there's some that do, and they always seem real grateful that they did. But then the ones that don't, a lot of times, then they'll turn up their nose at something that they don't understand instead of trying to find out about it.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So, you know, that's the thing. Just open your mind and step outside the box and check some other stuff out, and then you'll have a better appreciation for something that you don't understand.
Right. But that's ego not being allowed to let go. A lot of them, you know, to say that their box isn't complete and perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
They will try to pull what you're doing into their box, and that's now the correct way to do it.
That's something.
I also think, and I tried to say it earlier, is I think there's a race connection to it as well. I remember even with Black people, I remember my mom saying when I became, I guess, a jazz singer, she goes, "Why do you want to do jazz?" I mean, I think it was the timing, the type of clubs it was in, and my mom just wasn't into it until she found out, oh, a lot of people like this. I'm like, yeah, a lot of people do like this. But I think saying that jazz is actually American music really does not sit well with some people either. So that's why it's a little difficult to get people to understand it, because they're like, oh, that's not us. We don't do that. American music is actually the music that is European oriented.
Yes. But it's interesting because there's a video clip of the Andrews Sisters and Diana Ross and the Supremes. Okay. I don't know if you've seen that video clip with Sammy Davis Jr., where he has the Andrews Sisters sing the songs of the Supremes, and he has the Supremes sing the songs of the Andrews Sisters. Both groups are. If you Google it, okay, if you haven't seen it, because, it's on YouTube. You can Google it very simply. But what I was going to say is that America, when I grew up, you had Black radio stations, you had white radio stations, and same with television. And the way the music that was on one was Pat Boone, and then you had James Brown on the other. The beat was different. The dances were different. Okay. And I'm not saying that one was better or worse than the other, but they were different. When I go to play with a white big band during that time, the beat and the music was different than if I was playing with a Black big band, because the dances that they were doing at the Waldorf aren't the dances that they were doing uptown at the Savoy. Okay. So American music takes on a lot of different colors, and all of them are valid. Jazz really just swings and grooves you in a way that people just love it, and it's come to the forefront. And I think that has caused a problem for a lot of people.
And the thing about jazz that's so wonderful is that it's a culmination of two cultures that came together. It's something so beautiful came out of the ugliness of slavery, which was jazz. Because jazz was a combination of European rhythms mixed with African rhythms. So it created a genre of music that is uniquely American because of that. And I feel like people should be proud of that something that beautiful came from this country. You know what I mean? So, and it's unlike classical, because most of the classical music came out of the European countries. So you would think that there would be a bigger appreciation for jazz being an American music. So I don't know.
I agree with you.
Same here. And, I think that when you have an ill, the like a scourge of humanity like slavery, the fact that there could be something that could come out of it that would be worth keeping around, worth hearing, worth dedicating yourself to. I think that is valuable, and I'm surprised that a lot of people don't see that. That's surprising to me. So our time together, unfortunately, is waning. It feels like we just got here and started talking, but I've been learning so much from you all and enjoying this so much. I'm wondering if you might do me a favor. I have some young female musicians who I am trying to encourage, and who I want to really pursue their craft. And I'm just wondering what you, as three very, very successful, whatever success means, but three really successful people who have honed this craft over and experienced this music, played this music, what would you say to young aspiring female musicians? Because from experience, it's not easy. So what would you say to them if kind of given the opportunity there?
Well, I personally, the first thing I would tell them is to, practice your craft. I remember one of the things my father told me growing up. He said, I'm glad that you want to play the drums. This is great, but I want you to play them like you mean it, and know your craft. You have to know your craft because there are a lot of drummers out here, and you want to be able to learn your craft well, and don't just learn one style of music. Learn as many styles as you can, because if you do that, you'll work more.
Right.
So I would tell them that, to make sure that it is. Unfortunately, there's a stigma with women that maybe we tiptoe through the tulips when we play. So you want to make sure that when you go step out there to perform, you're not perceived as tiptoeing through the tulip. You know your craft well. You got your skills together, and nobody can say otherwise. You know exactly what you're doing. You're confident, and you know what's happening. So I would say that get your reading skills together, um, and don't let the because you're gonna be around a lot of guys. Don't let them make you feel inferior. Just you know, just stand your ground and you know, do what you're supposed to do, and don't let them make you feel any kind of way. And if they do, you can tell them how you feel about that.
I like that part.
So
Yeah.
so
You have to do that.
yeah. So that's one of the couple of things that I would say to them.
I agree with 100% with what she said. You have to get the best education you can possibly get. You've got to practice. You've got to know what you know and stand your ground. I would also add, respect yourself. Having been a woman that's traveled with guys and been the only one, or been on bands working shows where I'm the only one, I learned how to handle myself, and certain things. Like, I've never seen the band rooms in a lot of places, including the Apollo, because I came dressed for the gig and went right backstage. I'm not going in places where there's all the guys are just hanging out, as a woman, know what your parameters are, dress accordingly. Are you on the gig, or are you there to attract a certain kind of attention? Okay. Know what it is that you specifically want, out of the respect that you want to get from the gentleman that you're working with. If you're playing your part and you're kicking ass, as they say, and taking care of business, you'll be okay. But you got to respect yourself. But don't give up on your dreams too. I think women in this day and age were expected that after a certain age, you get married, you have kids, and you settle down, and you don't have to work anymore. You don't have to satisfy anything within yourself. Okay, that's not the case. You can do whatever it is you feel like doing and enjoy your life.
And I agree with everything these wonderful ladies said. For a singer, especially, I think sometimes we are more aware of I don't want to say aware of ourselves, but we're standing in front of people and we got to figure out how we look and all that stuff. But I always tell my students to know, like you said, know your craft, know your voice, and don't go around and copy other people's voices. You have to know your voice and how to keep it well. No smoking, no drinking, all that kind of stuff that can totally mess up a voice. And you want to live to still be doing your voice at 60 or 70 or even 80. There's a lady here that's 80 some years old. And do you know what I mean? Just taking care of yourself is like the best thing for vocalists.
Wise words from all of you. And, again, just a testament to the careers that you have had in this business. This is not meant to be insulting when I say this, but you all have been around the block, you've had experience, you've lived, you know what I'm saying? Like you've all had the experience to to really share what you're doing and share with younger people. I mean, I can tell that you are all very just very generous and giving people. Last thing here, what are you working on right now? I know it's a pandemic, but creative people just always create and always find a way to express themselves. And Edye, I know you've had this, I don't know how many, I lost count of how many live stream shows that you've done with Mike.
We've done 45 Facebook concerts, live concerts, and people are still showing up. I figured they'd be tired of us by now, but my husband and I, it's guitar and voice, and we invite people every week to come, and they've given us a few songs that they want us to do. So we do a combination of contemporary pop and jazz. And it's been fun. A few times we've had Evan, our son, play while he was here. And that was, most of the people, I think, came to hear him. And now it's just us. So not as many people come, but it's been fun. It's been very fun. It makes us practice. It makes us learn some new tunes, just the two of us, and try to figure out how we can get more people listening to us. So I think that's kind of the creative aspect of what I'm doing.
And people can check you out on Facebook at Edye and Mike, right?
Yes, Edye and Mike, Facebook, EDYE, just in case.
Terrific. Akua, what do you have going on?
Well, since the pandemic, I haven't really been working with the string quartet or with my jazz quartet. I've been writing, and I probably will see if I can't find a way to go back into the studio and record some very different things. Since I've had this time on my own to pick with myself, I've been doing some solo playing and working on some pieces like that that I will take into a jazz setting. I always wind up doing a lot of string work for other people, which is still easy enough to do. I can either overdub the cello part or do the arrangement and send it to them, and they can do it with their string ensemble, whether it's classical or jazz. I have the opportunities to do that. I'm always working on a new piece that I'm writing for a chamber orchestra or something like that.
Gayelynn, what are you up to?
I had been recording a CD, which I finished in 2019, and it was due to be released in 2020. And of course, we all know what happened. So I took 2020 and just, kind of tweaked things, the graphics, and did all that. And so now in mid-January, I released it on January 15th, and it is called Zoot Suit Funk. And it's a funkier side of jazz. And I will be in March. I will be in Grand Rapids at I don't know if I pronounced this right. I think it's called GR Noir.
GR Noir, yeah.
Yeah, so that's
it just
March.
Opened.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be there in March. I think we're talking about March 13th. So I'll be doing that for Women's History Month. So basically, yeah, you can get the CD on Bandcamp.com under Gayelynn McKinney, and you can also go to my website at www.gaylynnmckinney.com, and you will see a link for Amazon, which has the physical CDs, and of course iTunes. So that's what I've been been doing, is just getting the CD out and trying to get it spread out amongst the radio stations and things like that. And I know most people are going to be a little concerned, but I'm going to be very, very careful but Baker's opened back up.
Ah.
I will be actually performing there on Fridays and Saturdays. They have very strict protocol for the amount of people that can be in there, and he has a nice air purifier that's supposed to kill 99% of the germs. And of course, we'll all be masked up. So, so we'll be there on Fridays and Saturdays as well. I'll be performing with Ralph Armstrong.
Well, that's terrific. I'm really, really happy to see more people working. I'm really, really happy to see that, things getting back in a bit of a flow, no matter how we're making that happen, whether it's by writing and arranging and composing and overdubbing, or it's via live stream concerts, or it's live and in-person gigs. It's just really great to see the music keep going. I think, first of all, GR Noir is going to be such a special place in Grand Rapids. A wonderful Black-owned business that we all need to support. This is me telling you all, audience, and Grand Rapids' only real dedicated jazz club. So finally, we have a place like this in Grand Rapids that we can go to. I think that's really, really terrific. And soon, very, very soon, on March 13, you heard it here, Gayelynn McKinney is going to be in the house. It's going to be a good time. So we're really excited to have you. I got to put that date on my calendar, make sure that I can show up and hear everybody. And now remember, GR Noir is only doing reservations for their live in person gigs. So I don't want to say that, but it will hopefully be different by then. Right now they're on a reservation system, and Kevin Jones is doing the booking, so you can expect great music. By the way, Kevin's in the audience. He's here hanging out. Just wanted to put a little plug in there for GR Noir, because they're a really, really terrific new venue. Nadia and Shaitan are doing such a great job. And it's Black History Month. But of course, as I say, when you are a jazz musician, Black History Month is every month. I also think that about being an American citizen, but anyway, that's another story. So I want to thank my wonderful, gracious guests who are all incredible musicians for being here with me tonight. Please put your virtual hands together. Again, for Gayelynn McKinney, Akua Dixon, and Edye Evans Hyde. Thank you all so much for being here. It's been a terrific time having you.
Thank you, Jordan. Love you, girls.
Love you, girls. Take care.
Look forward to seeing you again.